Okay. Can you say, am I bright enough? I don't know.
Yeah, you're pretty good.
Okay. Let me see if I could adjust this screen here.
Perfect.
How's that?
That's
Okay.
good. Yeah.
Good. How are you today?
I'm good. How about you? How's everything? You're in
Well,
Florida, right?
thanks for holding up to 2 o'clock. You know, I had to do this physical therapy here, and with you where I broke my shoulder
Ooh.
about 5 weeks ago. So I'm at a pretty heavy therapy. Just a freak accident, but it happened, and I got to go to this therapy, and I had to change the appointment. So it worked out. So we're all set. I'm ready to go.
Yeah. Where you're in Florida, right?
Yes, Bonita Springs, Florida, on the West Coast, halfway between Fort Myers and Naples.
Awesome. And everybody in your family safe and healthy during this crazy time in
Yeah,
our
I
country?
mean, that's right. Everybody's still safe. Everybody still has their job, which is critical, and all the grandkids are doing well. We have quite a few grandkids, so and a lot of them are little.
All right. Well, let's get right into it because you have a crazy long resume, crazy long history. So I could see us going for a solid hour here, but however long it takes. So why don't we start where you grew up and what baseball meant to you early on, and did you play any other sports growing up?
Okay. Well, first of all, I grew up in Lakeview, West Hempstead area on Long Island, South Shore of Long Island. That's where I grew up, and uh, attended a Catholic grammar school in Malvern. Lakeview is sort of an in-between area between Rockville Center and Malvern.
Mm.
And I went to elementary school and Catholic school in Malvern, and then I went to St. Agnes Cathedral High School in Rockville Center, which doesn't exist anymore. It actually merged with Maria Regina High School, which then became Kellenberg High School, which you probably will know now.
Mm.
Hmm. And then from there, I went to St. John's, and on I went.
Well, so St. John's, right? So when you were in high school, did you what year did you commit to going to St. John's to play baseball?
Well, that's a good question because in those days, you really didn't commit till really late in your senior year,
Yeah.
sometime in your senior year, unlike today, which is the recruiting carousel that starts sometimes in sophomore year. But actually, I had a lot of schools were interested in me, and it really came down to basically Georgetown and St. John's.
Mm.
I was very interested in Notre Dame, but Notre Dame at that time, when I found out, the guy loved me, wanted me to come to Notre Dame, but he had no athletic scholarships. I found out later on that all the athletic scholarships on the baseball team were guys who were football players.
Mm.
So when Jack Kaiser asked me if I'd be interested in going to St. John's, I mean, that was the brass ring if you're going around in a carousel. So you might as well go to be with the best and challenge yourself. And that's why I chose St. John's. I had played against many of the players even though they were in college, I had played against many of them in the summertime when I was still in high school, even as early as a sophomore year.
That's awesome. Was it also part of it that it was a New York school and you're a New York guy? Was that some of the reason too?
It was St. John's reputation as a baseball program.
Mm-hmm.
It was definitely Coach Kaiser, who was, he was the Moses of New York baseball, that's for sure. You followed around him. And I had played in St. Agnes High School. One of my coaches was a legendary pitcher at St. John's, Tommy Hunt, left-hander that came out of Malloy and was an excellent basketball player and a baseball player. And he was a big influence. And also my head coach, Ed Finnegan at the time, was a St. John's alum.
Okay, so a lot of different St. John's connections. So anybody listening to this down the road or watching this down the road, just to put it in perspective, we're talking this was 1967, right?
1966. 1966, okay. I graduated high school. God, that seems like a long time ago.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to show people that St. John's, 1966, they were relevant, and then 2020, they're still very relevant. So that's that speaks to the program that they've put into place there. So your experience at St. John's. You guys, 1968 College World Series. What was that like? I mean, was that just a dream season for you guys?
Well, I was just a sophomore then, and in those days, freshmen never played on the varsity. You had your own freshman team, and that's where I played basketball. Also, I was the captain of the freshman basketball team, and even though we had 6 scholarship players, I wound up being named the captain by the players, and I started every game as a freshman. My coach was a guy by the name of Butch Kress, John Kress, who was Louis's assistant, Louis Conaseca's assistant, and went on to be the head coach at college at Charleston after he left the Nets with Coach Lou. And he was our freshman coach. And I stayed on the practice squad my sophomore year. And that's where I really got into coaching, because I was in the practice squad and I was sort of the point guard for all the teams. Like if Kansas was coming in, Seton Hall, Army. I would do the scouting with John Kress, and I knew the offense, and I'd teach the second team the offense. I'd run the offense. And I started thinking, this scouting thing is pretty cool, doing this. And we went had a big win against Kansas at Alumni Hall. They were really heralded. JoJo White was their guard. And so I really got interested in it. And I said, this is something I might want to consider in the future, but I had other plans. I was thinking on going to law school, et cetera, but that changed quickly when I got out of the Marine Corps.
So when you finish college, you go to the Marine Corps and stuff like that. How do you get your kind of foot in the door coaching wise? How does that kind of start?
Well, it was interesting how I got my background into position. I was recruited as a center fielder. My scholarship was a center fielder. And I evolved into a pitcher. I pitched only my last year of high school. And I was playing in the summer in the Atlantic Collegiate League. And my coach was a guy named Johnny Cooks. Great pitcher for the New York Yankees, won a couple of World Series games. And it was sort of the end of the summer, for summer league. Guys are going down, bad arms, this, that. So I told Johnny one night, we were playing in Roosevelt Stadium, which is an interesting place. It's where Jackie Robinson played his first professional game. It was a pretty historical park in Jersey City. And I was always there early because I was going to summer school. That's why I stayed home, so I could graduate on time. I took 12 credits after playing in a Cape League the year before. And so I told Johnny, I said, listen, Coach, I said, I used to pitch in high school. I said, if you need somebody, call on me. Well, we go into this extra inning game in Jersey City against Mount Vernon. And I was playing left field that night. And it was about the 12th inning. And the bases were loaded in the top of the 12th. And there were none out. And Johnny visits the mound. And Sammy Sunshine was the umpire. And he waves to me, come on in, come on in, come on in. So I go to Sammy. Sammy says, I don't want you. Cooks want you. So I go in to the mound, and Johnny looks at me and says, well, you said you could pitch. He says, get me out of this. And he tosses me the ball.
Oh.
And I got bases loaded. I got a guy by the name of Jimmy Cardasis, who was an All-American outfielder for NYU. Great player. Switch hitter. So he's batting righty. So I said to myself, this is, I got to get through this. So I threw 8 fastballs, and I figured I'll open him up with a curveball, because I know he's thinking dead red.
Yeah.
To make a long story short, I struck him out. I struck the next left-hander out, and I struck the next guy out. And I got out of the inning. We won the bottom of the 12th or 13th. Johnny says, she's really can't pitch. I told him when I walked off the field, I said, Johnny, what's the problem? You should have called on me earlier, So somehow it relayed to St. John's, to Coach Kaiser, that, he knew I pitched.
Yeah.
But, maybe you should give this kid an opportunity in the fall. And that's what happened. I started being a two-way player. I started pitching a little bit. In those days, we played about 24 games in the fall. So I started pitching again, and I did pretty good. And actually, I did very well. And then came my junior year. We had 2 excellent pitchers, Stan Babaracki and Paul Friccione. They were leftovers from the College World Series team, too. And one of them led the nation in ERA, and I did occasionally start, but I primarily was, in those days, a closer, pitched 2 to 3 innings. Yeah. I wound up closing, and one of my starts was against NYU, who was actually wound up going to the College World Series in '69, was ranked 4th in the nation.
Wow.
So Coach Guy says, if you start against NYU, we got a big game on the weekend. I got enough gap to be able to use you. Well, I threw 9 innings. I gave up like 3 hits. I had double figures in Ks. And Larry Gerashati was the manager of NYU. And after the game, he says to me, and everything was pretty cordial in those days. It wasn't any animosity between teams. And he says, where are you playing this summer? So I said, I really don't know. He says, I'm going to get you a spot. So I wound up, next week, Coach Kaiser got a call from a guy by the name of Baldy Muschetti in Boulder, Colorado. the Boulder Collegians, which was in those days was as good or better than the two Alaskan teams, the Gold Panthers and Fairbanks, or the Anchorage Glacier Pilots. So myself and another, our really outstanding outfield, Al Matson, who was a potential All-American, played on the USA team. We went out to Boulder, and from there, I mean, the team was loaded with guys from Texas, Arizona State, Southern Cal, Santa Clara. We had about 9 big leaguers, eventually 9 big leaguers. That roster of 22 guys. And I did play a little bit two-way. I did play first base there. I played outfield there, and I did really well. And then came back my senior year and had a very good year. We weren't as strong then because we had a lot of freshmen.
And people, seniors left,
Yeah, a lot of seniors left, and we had a lot of young freshmen, and and they were good players. Don't get me wrong, they were good players. But sometimes, even in coaching, I learned the best thing about freshmen is they become sophomores.
That's funny. That's funny.
That's true. So we had a successful year, but we lost to Seton Hall to go to the regionals.
That's Seton Hall.
Coach Kaiser took me out in the 9th. Made a big mistake.
You remember everything that has happened throughout your baseball career, photographic memory, I would say.
Well, the amazing thing about Coach Kaiser, in those days, we didn't have a hitting coach. We didn't have a pitching coach. We didn't have any other coach other than Coach Kaiser. It was a one-man show. And that was the same for Rod Data at USC, Larry Jarashati at NYU, Mike Shepard. Well, Mike wasn't the head coach then. It was Owen Carroll was the head coach at Seton Hall at the time, but they named the field after. And it was an interesting time. It was a real hotbed for local baseball. There were a lot of great teams in the New York area.
Well, we're getting back there slowly, but so was there any point in your kind of were you after college, right? I know you went to the Marines, but was it I'm going to play the next level? Was there even a thought to that, or it was just
well,
what was the
thought? I always wanted to play professional baseball. There's no question about that. But my draft number in those days didn't dictate it. I was 22 years of age. I was going to the Marine Corps. By the time I got out, I was 23. An interesting thing happened. I pitched for as a result of playing for Boulder, I got referred to the USA team, one of the first USA teams. And the head coach was Ron Fraser. So I had to sign up. I got into the Marine Corps Reserve down at Chapel Street, and I had to defer my entrance to Parris Island to be able to pitch for the USA. They gave me a hard time, but they basically agreed to it, not a problem. So I went before. I had a very successful tour with the U.S. Bucky Dent was our shortstop, by the way. And he was a young freshman at Miami-Dade Junior College at the time, Dade North. His teammate there was Mickey Rivers, too, by the way.
Yeah.
But so I go down there, and I come back. I go from pitching in front of 35,000 people to some DI screaming at me on yellow footprints at Parris Island, South Carolina. So that was a rude shock.
Yeah.
Yeah, and by the time I got out, I was 23, and I got contacted by the Venezuelan Winter League when I got out in January to come and pitch for a team called La Guaira. Now, I hadn't thrown a baseball in 6 months, and I was thinking about going to spring training and try to walk on, but I said to myself, wait a second, how am I going to get to the big leagues at 23? By the time I go to the minor leagues, it's 24. I got an opportunity. Coach Kaiser got me a job at Holy Family Diocesan High School in Huntington, which became St. Anthony's. I was a phys ed teacher, temporary leave replacement, and I was going to go to law school. I was scheduled to go to law school to Columbia in the fall. So I said, well, I'll try this out. I got a job. I'm getting married. My wonderful wife, Rita, who's been with me for 49 years. I went out. Charlie McGuckin was the AD, was a legendary coach and athletic director in Suffolk County. Ex-baseball guy, too, by the way, scouted for the Mets. And I really liked it. And I was working in the summer for Rockville Center Recreation because you need a summer job. You're not making a lot of money teaching. And my former head coach at St. Agnes, Frank Morris, says, listen, why don't you come and be the varsity baseball coach at St. Agnes? I'm 23 years of age.
Why not, right?
Yeah, Ed Finnegan, my former coach, took a job as a guidance counselor at Central Islip High School. So I said, well, I need a job. Well, 1 week later, I'm doing some Babe Ruth game for the recreation department with a guy by the name of Nat Childs, who was a legendary umpire on Long Island. And this is 15-year-old kids. And the two managers start arguing with each other all the time. They were getting nasty. So I threw both of them out. They start packing their bags. And I go, where you going? We can still play. So we played the game. And some guy that was watching the game comes up to me and it says, I never saw anybody do something like you manage those kids. You manage the game. You threw the two guys out that were going nuts. He says, what do you do for a living? I said, I'm looking for a job. He says, come on to Freeport. I'm gonna give you a job. So I went to Freeport the next day. I met with this principal, George Coop, wonderful guy. I said, George, I'm not certified. He says, nah, just stay one page ahead of the kids. 6th grade teacher. I met with him for an hour. They took me across to meet the guy by the name of Don Koslow, who was the superintendent of schools, who was a former Marine. He says, listen, I'll tell you what, I'll get you the job temporary for a year. You got to get certified, and I'll give you credit for the service. I'll start you on step 2. He said, if you get your degree, you know, certified. I was poli-sci major. You know, in those days, you only need 12 credits in education to get certified.
Mm.
So I took him at post while I was coaching, and I called up Coach Morris, and I said, okay, I can take the varsity job. He made me an assistant with him in basketball, and Frank Morris was a legendary coach. I mean, we had great players. We were the top 1, 2, or 3 programs on Long Island during that era. In fact, my senior year at St. Agnes, we had 12 guys. Do you know that 11 of us played Division I basketball?
Wow, that's impressive.
6 of us became captains of their basketball team.
Whew,
Unbelievable. Yeah, we were
that's
good. We were real good. We averaged over 100 points a game.
That's awesome.
And, yeah, I mean, I was on a bench. You know? and when I was in the Marine Corps, after I went through basic at Paris Island, advanced infantry at Camp Geiger, Camp Lejeune, we go in these buses. We usually show up at like 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. Some guy meets us with a silver helmet, one-way sunglasses. He knows me. And by the way, when he's yelling at us, he says, does anybody play basketball? So a couple of kids raised their hand. I was one of them that raised my hand. Some kid says he played for Winokin High School. Another kid plays for this. Another guy played for that. I said, I played for St. John's. He says, good. You report at 8 a.m. for practice. So that's how I made the Marine team at Camp Lejeune, and I toured the Marine team. Even when I was in basic training, they contacted me to try to pitch for the Navy Subpac team in Hawaii. And I said, no way. I'm just doing my training for 6 months, going to reserves, going back home. So that was it. And that's how I got into coaching. I never went to law school. And I stayed with Freeport for 32 years teaching. I wound up going to the junior high school. I taught a special class superintendent and a principal, both principals, my guy, George Coop, and Hardy Morgan, who I knew from back in Lakeview. Said, listen, we want to start this behavior modification program. And we had really the worst behaved kids in junior high. It wasn't small. It was 1,200 students. I had 7th and 8th grade. I was self-contained all day. I taught them every subject. I taught phys ed. We ate lunch in a room. And that's what I did for 25 years.
Wow.
And I had, and the kids were really good. I mean, they were the bad kids, but they had an alternative to being placed out of school or on home tutoring, and the parents had to sign off, you know, you can go to Mr. Hirschfield's class. But I had such a good reputation in Freeport after teaching for 5 or 6 years that and I built it initially that they said, yeah, I'll go to Mr. It became a legendary class in Freeport. So the parents would easily sign off. And I seldom really ever had a problem with any child, boy or girl, in that junior high. And we had a good time.
That's awesome. So you coach. So how long did you coach at Freeport for?
I never coached at Freeport. I coached at St. Agnes till 1978.
Oh yeah. Sorry.
78. Yeah.
Okay.
1978.
So 1978 is I'm just trying to follow the rule where
That's
you
okay.
were.
I jump around.
So 1978, you coach there, and then where do you go from there? When does New York Tech come into play?
Well, some of my kids from the high school team played for a gentleman by the name of Richie Tappan in the Connie Mack League.
Okay.
For Elmont. He used to play at Sewanaka High School. And I used to watch some of my kids play for us. And he said to me one day, he calls me up. My wife was giving birth to our 3rd child. And I told Coach Morris, listen, I can't coach basketball and baseball. I said, I'm going to just do baseball now. He was disappointed. He says, you really have a future in basketball as a coach. And I was doing all the basketball summer camps with Long Island Lutheran. I ran the upper division for Ed Vischer at the time. I said, well, my strength, even though I love basketball and I think I'm a very, very good coach, my strength is baseball. I'm going to stay with that. Well, I go home, and that night I get a call from Richie Tappan. We had moved. I had a home in Freeport, and we just bought a house in Center Island, which is north of Oyster Bay. So Richie Tappan calls me, and he says, would you like to be my pitching coach? Because we're going to go to Division I maybe next season or the year after. We're going to make an application. And the president and I talked about it. Alex Shaw was the president. And we want you to be on board because you have a Division I background. And so I went over there. I met with Richie again. I met with our AD at the time. And I met with the president, Alex Shaw. He's an old-time sports guy. And he said, we're going Division I. It might be by 80 or 81. We want you to be the pitching coach. And Richie was great. When he was the head coach, I was the pitching coach. He never interfered with me. He said, you got the pitches and you run with it. And that's what we did. And one of the years, we actually won, I think, 29 in a row. We were Division II at the time.
Yeah.
And we had a great team. I'll tell you what, some of those teams were as good as any team we had in Division I. They were really good. But nobody knew about it. Nobody knew about them. In those days, it was Delphi, CW Post, New York Tech, New Haven, Lemoyne. Those were the strong Division II operations, without a doubt. And then we were going to go to 81. We're going to go to Division I. And I really had to stop coaching because my wife had 3 kids, all little. I said, this has got to stop. I said, I don't know what, I might be back. So I told Richie. He was disappointed. And I was home for 5 months. And Richie Tappan was a full-time admissions director. And he was a good coach, very disciplined in his approach, good leader among men. And they got a new director of guidance, and he said, you can't spend all this time in the baseball field. We want you to spend more time in the admissions office. He says, well, the only reason why I'm doing the admissions is because I can coach baseball. Overnight, he left.
Wow.
I get a call at home, unbeknownst to me. I don't even know this is going on. Sam Stern, the AD, calls me. He says, listen, we got an opening as the varsity baseball coach. I spoke to some of the kids. They want you to be the head coach. Would you be the head coach? I said, wait a minute. I got to talk to Rita about this. I went down. I spoke to Rita. I said, listen, they're offering me the head job. So she says, well, go talk to them. Well, the next day I went there. I spoke to Sam. We agreed on a salary, and I had a good budget. Basically, Alex Shaw told me you got the maximum number of scholarships. In those days, it was 13. And what's my budget? He says, spend what you need. Don't be ridiculous, but just let them win. My father once told me one thing. I told my dad, I said, I got offered the job as a head coach. He was an old-time baseball guy. He said, well, you got a chance to win with this team? I saw them the last couple of years. I said, yeah, we can win with this team. He says, well, never coach a team you don't have a chance to win. You can look bad in a hurry. So I took the job. In 82, we did fairly well.
At this point, you guys already made the move to Division I,
We
right?
made the move in 81. Most of those players I had recruited along with Richie.
Yes.
So I had a good nucleus back. I had to square some things away academically for kids going from Division II to Division I. That took a little bit of an orientation session for some of them. But they adapted, like most young kids. They adapt. And we had a fairly successful season in 82. We got into the ECACs. In those days, that was like, there was only 32 teams got into the NCAAs.
Yeah.
So you had to win the ECAC Metro Division to go to the regionals.
And who was in that division at that time?
Teams. The ECA Metro was the primary teams were St. John Seton Hall, Buffalo, which happened to be pretty good at the time, St. Francis occasionally. Unfortunately, it doesn't have baseball anymore, and Long Island University. Those were the big-time teams in the New York metropolitan area. And then you would go to the regional. So we didn't win that one, but in 83, we won it. We beat Buffalo in round 1. We beat Seton Hall in round 2, and we beat St. John's in round 3,
Mm.
and we went to the regionals in May.
That's awesome. So I mean, obviously there's a crazy long history in New York Tech, but how did it change like the recruiting process from, when you were there day one to all of a sudden you're there into the 2000s? What was that like, adapting to the different changes, like people were committing senior year and then all of a sudden you had to start recruiting sophomore year and stuff like that.
Well, that really never changed really till in the mid 90s. Up to that 91 season, primarily, we were the cat's meow. I'll be quite honest with you. We were recruiting head to head with Seton Hall and St. John's, in many instances winning players. We were the place to play. It was a great park to hit in, number one. And my forte was always pitchers. And with all the kids that we had signing, if you want to play professional baseball, this was a place you could learn, you could grow, you could improve, and you're certainly going to get nationwide exposure because we're one of the first teams to ever travel to places like Texas, Louisiana. I used to do weekends. Thank God for People's Express, which was the budget airline. We used to get on People's Express and go to Houston. Old Dominion, we used to get on People's, and they were a top 20 team then. Mark Newman was the head coach. And so those kids gained a lot of exposure playing on schedule. And I was good with getting kids placed in the summer leagues because I knew a lot of contacts from when I played, in the summer leagues. Because I played all over. I played in the West. I played at Cape Cod. I played in the Midwest. So I knew a lot. The same people were pretty much in place. But in 91, we had a lot of kids drafted, including the first rounder, Al Watson.
Yeah.
Our school went into financial difficulty. We almost went bankrupt. And one of the things they had to do, they stopped all athletics in 1991 after the 91 season. So we were shut down. I had to place all those players, and I placed them all over the country in different places, whether it was Lamar University, St. John's, Marist College, Fairleigh Dickinson, Holy Cross, Hofstra. I placed them all in certain places, and with the idea that we would come back soon, they put me on a committee, myself and our track coach, legendary track coach, Pete Zinno, who had Olympic athletes after Olympic athletes at Tech, on a committee. And we were to rearrange the budget so that they could put it together for the business office so the business office could approach the banks. So in 93, we got approved to restore, but never were we ever restored to the budget that we had once had. Whether it was scholarships, whether it was recruiting, whether it was operations, etc. So now we go into the 90s, and we actually wound up doing pretty well in the early 90s. I mean, we had a winning record our second year back. We beat Seton Hall and St. John's our second year back. So, and we beat Texas Tech when they were number 2 in the country. And, we had some very good success there. But then they stopped the ECAC, so we became an independent, and we started scrambling around. And
is that tough to be? Is that tough to be an independent in college, or is it?
It's not tough to be. It's a good question. I don't think it's tough to be independent if you have the resources. Miami did it for years.
Yes. Yeah.
Today, no, you can't be independent today. You have to be associated with a conference here. In those days, you could be independent and be relatively successful. And I used to take all the conferences and get home and homes, and my school came up with some guarantees, and we would bring in teams from New York like Old Dominion. We would bring in Florida Atlantic. We brought Maine down they never played away. I even had West Point play. Their only midweek game away was against us, West Point. So I had no problem scheduling, but you have to have the resources to gain the players. I mean,
does it give you a little bit more work to do to be independent, or?
Yeah, a lot more work because I was only recruiting regionally in the New York metropolitan area. We didn't have any dormitories. It was all private housing that kids was getting involved with. And, parents are more selective. I mean, I'm a parent. Where's my kid going to sleep? He's got some apartment, it's 12-month. It was much more difficult. Yeah, no question. But we still maintained very competitive. And we got into the Mid-Continent Conference for a while. Then that disbanded. Then we got into actually started the New York State Conference, which was the new Division I schools like Binghamton, SUNY, Albany, Stony Brook. Of course, Hofstra was in there, and we won that. We won that thing. It was amazing how well we did, and we had a couple kids sign off of that team. Then we were in the Mid-Continent, and they really made us play like 3 weekends at home and 5 on the road. It was like nuts. Yeah, and it was really a disadvantage. And we had no control. I hate to knock officials, but we had no control of officials. I mean, it was like you played in Alabama and you had Sam and Jethro as the umpires. It wasn't too good.
That's
wasn't too good. But the kids matured and they learned to deal with it, and we were playing baseball. Then we got into the Great West League, which on a fluke. We were starting an independent league between me and a couple of guys that just turned Division I, Northern Colorado. I'm trying to think of who else. It was Utah Valley. And we got a guy that was going to share the whole thing. And because it really didn't matter. And I went to our president at the time. He said, how can we go into a league like this? I said, listen, right now.
Yeah, because you guys are going to New York, going all the way west. You didn't care? Yeah.
I said, listen, it's 5 plane trips a year. I said, if I cut it back to 4 and don't go to spring training and do bus trips into Virginia early in the season, I said, it's costing us the same because, if you get in a plane, you only stay in an hour longer. What's the difference? So he said, well, how are we going to raise them? I said, I'll raise the money for fundraising for all the plane trips. He says, okay, if you can raise all the money for the plane trips, fire it away. And that's how we did it. We'll take care of the hotels. We'll take care of the meal money, and which I did pretty good with. The business office wanted to take over. Said, no, let me take care of this. There's no way you can beat the way I can shop. So I really did well with shopping. And so, and the other thing is I had great assistant coaches. I had the advantage. I had student assistants that were coming back out of pro ball and needed to finish a degree. I had a GA program. So I had graduate assistant training for a coach, and I had some great part-time assistants. Of course, we were limited in Division I, but on a rotating basis, I had so many alumni guys come back from pro ball. It was a tremendous staff. I had a former big leaguer that was with Ray Gianelli played for me. Ray Gianelli came back, was there for a lot of years. Larry Minor, I got
Isn't
back.
he still
He's
still
back.
there?
Yeah, he's back. Yeah, with Frank now. But
Does that make it? There's a lot. The assistants on the staff now today under normal circumstances, their season this year. How many assistants played under you? I looked. I thought it was 2 or 3. How many assistants are on the staff now that played for you?
In Division II, you can have more assistants than Division I. There's limitations. Right now is Jimmy Gels is Frank's first assistant, and then we have Chris Rojas who played for me, and then we have Ray Gianelli who played for me. So that's 3. And the other 2 were Frank Battaglia, who's a former head coach at Queens College, great guy, and is Angelo, who was friends with Jimmy Gels when he was coaching at St. Dominic's. So 3 guys actually are assistant coaches. And that was really a good link to the program in the past. And Frank is just a class guy and a gentleman. And getting him to come back and be a head coach to try coaching now. And his good friend was Jimmy Gels, so that really worked. Very close. So, and I recruited Frank too, by the way. I lost out to him I never forget, he was playing for, digress with a quick story. He was playing for Smithtown, and they had another good kid out there, Mike Simonello, was a wonderful guy, wound up being a captain at Princeton. He's an orthopedic surgeon now. And I go out, one of my kids I was recruiting, Brian Montalto, was a 2-way kid out of Central Islip, a pitcher and a catcher. Well, I'd never seen him pitch. So I knew he was a pretty good catcher, but I wanted to see him pitch against Simonello and Frank. So I'm behind a backstop with a lot of scouts because Frank was very heralded, and so was Mike Simonello. And Frank just hit 2 on a button into right center field. I mean, he smoked him. It looked like 3 woods on a fairway the way he hit him. Long, with a lot of run. And I called up Blanky because Blanky was the recruiter over at Seton Hall. I said, Blanky, I know you got Frank. I really feel bad, but I tell you what, I feel bad for you too, because the way he's hitting the ball today, I don't think he's ever getting to South Orange. She goes, "What do you mean? What do you mean?" I'm telling you, he hit lasers today. So, and Frank wound up getting drafted, and he never made it over to play for Shep and Blank. But,
That's a good story. That's a good story.
I mean, Blanky and late Mike Shepard, we were very good friends, very close friends over the years, despite the fact of how competitive we were.
Yeah, it sounds like it sounds like you were going head to head with every year Seton Hall and St. John's. Did it? I know you went to St. John's. I know you have nothing but love. Obviously, sounds like you had a great time there. But was there ever a little extra, kind of drive for you to beat St. John's because you went there, or not really?
Oh, you always had extra drive, but you had a sense of pride for the program. But it was one of those things like if you recruit against them,
Oh yes, yeah.
Like I'll give you an example. Richie Aurelia was I heavily recruited Richie.
Yes.
Richie wanted to come to us, and he'll verify the story. And I banged out Oklahoma State when I made a home visit, and he was all excited to come to Tech. And all of a sudden, Coach Russo called him up, and he increased his offer, an offer that I couldn't even match. So Richie was upset. He calls me up. He's a gentleman. He calls me up. He says, Coach, St. John's gave me this, this, and this, and this. I said, Rich, I'm going to tell you something. You're crazy not to take that offer. He says, I'm upset you're not going to come to me, but I understand why you're going to St. John's. I said, well, at least you're going to St. John's. I said, it's a good program, solid. You're going to play. You're going to get recognition. Things are going to work out for you. Don't worry about it. And that's happened for a few guys. I remember I'm trying to think about Baxter. Mike Baxter was playing for Malloy. And that's the kid that banged himself against the wall when Santana was pitching a no-hitter for the Mets.
Yes. Yeah. So anybody listening to this, they definitely know that.
Mike was playing for Malloy, and I loved Mike. He was a great player. He wanted to come to me. He says, Coach, I can't get in an Ivy League school. And if I can't get an Ivy League school, I'm going to come to Tech. I said, well, where do you want to go? He says, well, I really want to go to Columbia, but I don't think I'm going to get in. I said, well, do you really want to go to – he says, if I get into Columbia, I'll go there. So I said, well, if you don't get into Columbia, you're coming to Tech. Absolutely. I said, I'll tell you what. Mickey Aoki was the head coach who wound up being at Notre Dame. Now he's at another school. I forget the name of the school now. He was at Notre Dame for a lot of years. I called Mick. I said, Mick, do you want Baxter? He says, yeah, but I don't know whether he wants to come here. And I got to, I have to change around my priorities and admissions. I said, Mick, if you can get him in, you got him. But I need to know, because if he's not coming to Columbia, I got him. So, what do you think? He says, I'll tell you what. Give me till tomorrow. If I can get him in, I'll call. Well, the next day he called him. He got him in. Baxter called me. He says, I got into Columbia. I said, see, it's good. Good luck to you. Well, he went to Columbia for a great freshman year, and Mick had just taken over the program. And I hate to knock different kids too, because I don't know who was on the team. But Mike was upset that the kids didn't have enough time or weren't serious enough about baseball. So he went to Mick and said, listen, I got to go to a program where I have more time to develop my skills. So I think him and Mark Cussetta from the Bayside Yankees wind up talking to Vanderbilt, and that's how he transferred to Vanderbilt, and that's why I wound up there. Yeah.
That's awesome. We'll come back to New York Tech days. I want to talk to you about your New York Baseball Academy, when that was started, how that started, and where you got that idea from. Because you were heavily involved.
I'm blessed because I didn't create the idea. My wife created the name, by the way, but I didn't create the idea. I was coaching at St. Agnes, and I was teaching in Freeport, and I had a job called summer school. And I applied for a summer school job. It's another way. I'm working at night for the rec center. I said, listen, I'd like to be a summer school teacher. Well, what would you like to do? I said, well, I'm certified in elementary ed, I'm this and that now. I can go up to grade 8. So they said, well, we have an opening for third grade science. Third grade science. I had the greatest time with these kids for 5 weeks. It was a great little thing. I made money, worked at the rec center at night. The next year, apply for this. So many people apply for summer school. I get a call from the assistant superintendent and says, listen, so many people are applying. We want to be able to rotate this around, like you can have it next year, not this summer. I said, what do you mean next year? I got to pay my mortgage. So I said, okay. So I go to the rec center, and the rec center was run by a guy named Bill Cook, a wonderful guy, was the CO of the United States Marine Corps Reserve Unit in Garden City. I was assigned to Huntington. And I was talking, he was the guy that hired me for doing night work. And he says, well, Bobby, he says, why don't you start a baseball school? Nobody does a baseball school. He says, right, there's no baseball camps. Little league ends and everybody stops playing. And he says, you can start a baseball, you can work for the rec center. He says, furthermore, you can work for yourself, whatever you want. So he gave me 3 alternatives. So I chose an alternative that I would work for a percentage of the profits after expenses with the village and the recreation department. They would handle all the administration. We started. We had 14 kids. It was the first baseball camp on Long Island. Nobody had it. New York Post got a hold of it, and they did a two-page spread on me with 14 kids. And I was coaching a high school team, and I told them, I'm running a baseball school, and if you don't go to it, I'm probably going to cut you. So we had about 8 of those kids, all the way teasing. And I had a couple of coaches gave me a couple of kids, signed them up. And I had my first year, I had one of my former, not teammates, but friends from the summer, former pitcher for Southern Cal, by the name of Brent Strom, who's the pitching coach for the Houston Astros, by the way. And I became friends with Brent when he was playing for Southern Cal, and he played for the Gold Panthers, Fairbanks. Well, he came out as a guest. I picked him up in Manhattan. He came out. He was my first guest in the camp. And the next year I had Buddy Harrelson came out. And gradually it increased. It increased. And I ran it. It became for 2 weeks. And I was doing a lot of kids, all Rockville Center kids. Everybody in Rockville Center would go to the camp. Remember, I knew all the parents.
Yes,
I knew everybody. So I started that. And when I got the head coach's job, before I got the head coach's job, I'm at Freeport in junior high, doing that behavior mod class. I get a call from Larry Keating, who was the AD of Adelphi. And the principal calls me down the office. You got a guy named Larry Keating, the AD of Adelphi. He needs to talk to you. It's very important. So I said, okay. I get on the phone. Larry says, listen, do you want to run a baseball camp for Lee Mazzilli? Lee Mazzilli was a hot item for the Mets then. He's starting up a camp. He's got some partners. They want to meet with you. I recommended. And Larry and I used to drive when I used to do the summer basketball camps at Lutheran. I used to drive Larry up there all the time. Larry became eventually the AD at Seton Hall, and then he became director of basketball operations for Kansas. He just retired. And so I met the guys. I met Lee. I met Bob Horan. Was the other guy he's an NFL player agent, and Bob Ross was the lawyer, and Tony Attanasio was the agent. He's still an agent, Tony. So we started this at St. Paul's. Well, Lee was hot. We had 425 kids. We had overnights. We had overnight kids. Every Italian from Brooklyn came to this camp. So I hired all the coaches, and my co-director was a wonderful guy by the name of Joe Malone, who was Lee's high school coach at Lincoln, eventually ran the PSAL athletics in the city of New York, eventually. So Joe and I were the co-directors of this camp, and we hired all the coaches. He brought in the city guys. I took care of the Long Island guys. We had a great staff. Howie Gershberg was the pitching coach at St. John's. Andy Baylock was the head coach at Connecticut. And we'd all sleep over. And we had great college guys, great coaches. If you were a coach on Long Island in New York City, you worked this camp. It was the place to be. 1 week. And I did it the next year. And then I became the head coach. And I asked the guys, I said, listen, I said, you want to come in over at New York Tech? He said, nah, we'll probably keep doing it the way we're doing. I said, well, okay. And I started the one at New York Tech. And I almost was partners with Willie Randolph. Willie Randolph's agent was a guy by the name of Bill Goodstein, 666 Fifth Avenue. So Billy asked me, why do you want Willie? He was a player agent, so I figured I'd contact player agents. Why do you want Willie to be your partner? I said, because Willie represents everything I want in a baseball player. Number one, he's tough. He's determined. He has a great work ethic. He's local. Tremendous. So he says, okay, sounds like a plan. What's your business plan? I had a little stuff written on loose leaf paper. He says, well, let's call Willie in. So he brought up his wife to the next meeting. Willie and I got along great. And that was the year, the strike year.
Oh.
And George Steinbrenner was always at odds with Bill Goodstein for whatever reason. Bill was also Reggie Jackson's agent. And
That's probably why.
maybe. But George kept asking Willie to make appearances, but it was on a strike year. So Bill would tell him, no, Willie's not going. Well, Willie felt he's got his last year of his contract. He wanted to stay in New York. So I'm getting on a train in Rockville Center to sign a contract for our partnership, 50-50. I called Billy's office from a payphone. We didn't have cell phones in those days. Billy says, I got good news and bad news. The good news is the contract's all ready to go. Looks good to me. Fair for both parties. The bad news is Willie called me late last night, and I'm not his agent anymore. I have a name of a new agent who wants to speak to you. Willie's still interested in the project. So, wow. I call the guy up from the payphone again. Train goes by. He says, well, I'd really like to sit down with you and stuff. I said, listen, this is almost spring training. I said, I don't have time for this. I said, maybe we should address it the next year. Fair enough. I said, if I'm interested next year, I'll give you a call. I started it up. Rita came up with the name of New York Baseball Academy. And we started at New York Tech, and it grew and flew through the roof.
That's awesome. That's
it's
awesome.
Rita too. It's not just me. It's Rita was.
I know you. When we spoke before on the phone, you definitely mentioned to. So if Rita's listening or she's in the background, you definitely said.
She's actually watching my grandson play tennis on ESPN3 down in Tampa in a pro tournament. He plays for Ohio State. He's a freshman. Was the only freshman named All-American in the country.
That's awesome.
Cannon Kingsley is his name, so I got to give him a shout out because he flat out play. So Rita's watching him inside. But Rita came up with the idea, and her background, her master's degree was student personnel administration from Columbia. So this was a natural for her.
Absolutely.
Bring on her staff to coordinate the transportation contracts, public relations with the parents, brochures, publicity, all this type of stuff. My job was basically hire the staff, manage the staff, run the program, keep everybody happy, and have a program of instruction for them. And we had lifers come back. I mean, kids started at age 6. They went all the way to 18. And our upper level program was called a PEP program, Personal Evaluation Program. We were the first ones ever to do this. My partner in that was Eddie Blankmeyer. He was at Seton Hall because it was a different segment. It wasn't a normal baseball school. It was an evaluation program. And we had all college guys. We did videotapes of every player. We wrote up evaluations. Eddie did a fantastic job with that and was limited to 75 to 85 kids a week, a 3-day program, and Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday to rain day. And everybody got a videotape. Then it became a CD. Then it became a little thumb drive. And we ran that for 25 years.
Yeah.
Did that. And Eddie became the head coach of St. John's. He still did it. We had all the St. John's coaches. We had the assistants from Seton Hall. I had guys come in from all over, Dartmouth, Columbia, Fordham University, Maine, all William and Mary. I had coach from Miami, coach from Texas A&M. They would all come in. We were the first ones to do that. Eddie and I sat down one day. We came up with this idea different than the regular program. It was great. Great.
That's awesome. And that you ran that, you and your wife Rita ran that until when? 2013?
Well, it's 7 years. We sold it to Hofstra University.
Yeah, 2013.
Yeah, we ran that through. And then Hofstra hired me for a couple of years to be their director. Rita worked for them for 1 year, and then she was out. which was fine. She looked to be out right away, but
it was just time to step away because I know you retired from New York Tech in 2011.
Yeah.
And obviously stepped away from this. Was it kind of you were like, hey, I'm kind of done with this? But like, what was that like? You were just over it?
But it's time to turn the page. You know, I said this
Yes.
at my retirement dinner. It's better to know when to turn the page than do one page too many.
That's a good point.
You know, and it was time, and I had all the staff ready to go. All the staff moved over, all the administration moved over, and they were just a natural. Now, what they do with it is another story. You know, because now they're in charge of the budget. You know, I spent money. You know, I spent a lot of money.
Well, New York Tech's still doing some good stuff, right? Last year they.
You know, yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. You know, New York, being a New York Tech guy, and you know, as much as St. John's guy, I was St. John's for 4 years, but I was a New York Tech for 32. You know, I'm a New York Tech guy, and I was so happy. No, not to put down the guy that took my place over. He's a nice man, gentleman, you know, but when you had to go in and recruit in a Division I format with the budget he had, I mean, I had linkage, I had resources, I had people in Canada. I knew people would come because I was there.
Yeah,
I was there. They would come because I was there, and it was a tough job for him. So when things were going really bad and turning south, and with Division I, you need more money every single year, more and more. I mean, you could see the pressure a lot of these colleges are under now. In fact, some of the schools are even dropping different sports now because of the crunch.
Absolutely.
COVID-19. I mean, it's a non-revenue sport. But at least in baseball at New York Tech, we brought in a significant amount of revenue to the college. So that was considered a revenue producer. It wasn't direct with fans, you know, eating popcorn and cheering in the stands. But as a result of New York Tech baseball, you know, they made a lot of money. It kept cafeteria people employed, kept bus people employed, it kept my coaches employed, it kept college students employed. You know, all those people were employed. And it wasn't just college kids from New York Tech. I never wanted to have a staff of New York Tech. I hired guys from St. John's, CW Post, Hofstra, all the kids that went away to school that came back. I even sponsored a team in the ACBL called the Long Island Collegians, and all the guys that played for the Collegians worked the camp. That was their summer job. So they had a place to go, you know, a place to work where they could get off at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock and go play in the ACBL. I did that. We won a championship a couple of years too. And they used to criticize me because I had all freshmen. I had all freshmen. And I used to tell the ACBL, I said, I guarantee by the time these kids are juniors, I'll have more kids drafted than all your teams. And that's what it was. We had a lot of kids drafted off our team, but they were freshmen. I would have kids leave in the middle of the year and go play in the Cape because I knew the coaches. Oh, I need a center fielder. I need a pitcher. Okay, go ahead. You go. Joey Smith, go up and pitch for Katuitt. You know, really? Yeah. Okay, go. We'll survive. We're good. So,
that's awesome.
It's all about the kids. You know, that's what it's all about. It's all about the kids. You know, and people used to say, well, coach, you know, how long are you going to stay in a job? You know, how long? I said, well, what, you guarantee you're going to stay on a job if you're a junior and you get drafted? I said, so don't put the same onus of responsibility on me. We do what's best for ourselves and our family. You know, and I'm in the same boat as you. I said, I'm not looking to go anywhere. I said, I'm over 60 years of age. Where am I going to go? I just hope I go to heaven.
Oh, that's so great. So let's talk about kind of obviously the next phase of your career. You retire from obviously coaching. The camp obviously Hofstra buys it from you. So how do you get kind of brought back in, and now you're play-by-play for St. John's, which is just like, I mean, the resume. That's why when you sent it to me, I was like, oh my God, the resume was like, no wonder you know everybody in New York baseball and beyond. It's just like amazing how the life that you have had, honestly.
Well, that's because my wife allowed me to have this life. Let's put things in perspective.
That is true.
You know, no question about that. But that was another freak. You know, I got into coaching by just a happenstance. I got into New York Tech by a happenstance. And when I took that job at Tech, it was halfway home. Remember I told you I sold my house in Freeport. It was halfway home.
Yeah.
That worked out. How I got the head job was because luck is what you create too. You know, you put yourself in the right spot and the opportunity presents itself, your relationship with the players. your relationship with other coaches. So I retire. At the retirement dinner, we must have had 250 people at the retirement dinner. It was unbelievable. It was standing room only, even outside the cocktail hour. It was unbelievable. People came in from all over the country. And St. John's took a table. So I had Coach Kaiser was there, Coach Blankmeyer, Coach Hampton. I think Eddie's son Ty was there. Louis Conaseca was there, the head of development. St. John's was there. So Coach Kaiser says to me, he says, Bobby, why don't you come in next week? I want to put something forth, see if you're interested in this. I said, well, what's it about? He says, well, let's just sit down and talk. So I go in next week. Coach Blankmeyer's there. Coach Kaiser's there. A guy named Warner Fursell, legendary broadcaster's there. And I'm trying to think of the name of the guy. Oh, my God, I can't think of him. He's now the acting AD at Fordham. He was the head of athletic development at the time for St. John's. I'm remiss for a name. And I'll get it before we're done with the conversation.
No worries.
Yeah, but they said, we're starting up this broadcasting on ESPN3, and we want you to be the baseball analyst. We used to do radio only. But all these guys. I said, Coach, with all due respect, I don't know anything about broadcasting. I was a teacher. I was a coach. I was a poli-sci major. He says, well, you know baseball. You know all these guys. He says, don't curse anybody out. You're all right. He says, plus you're working for Warner Fursell. And he had been broadcasting for forever. At the time, he was semi-retired. He was doing play-by-play radio for the Brooklyn Cyclones. He had retired from his Seton Hall job. And Warner sat with me, and we broke down what our responsibilities were prior to a broadcast. I'll handle this, you handle that, but you handle this background information, I'll handle this background information. Because, we could get stuck with a game and it's 10 to 1. We got to be able to fill space.
A lot of time to cover.
And as long as we don't step on each other's toes, give each other a chance to speak, don't start a story with 2 out. And and he says, "Well, we'll go with this." So I did all the home games, which was a combination of ESPN3, Fox, St. John's TV. I only think we didn't do any radio, no radio, the first year, and it was great. It was great. I really enjoyed it. I did like 28 contests, and then, unfortunately, that summer, Warner Fursell passed away. Shocking, terrible. So the next year, I was working with an assortment of play-by-play guys, all very good, all wound up doing really well. Ed Cohen does play-by-play for the Knicks.
Yeah.
Mike Walsh does play-by-play for the Cleveland Browns. John Yardley does Major League Soccer. He came out of Rice University. All really nice guys. I'm remiss not saying everybody's name because they all were pleasant to work with. And I knew all the coaches. And I would interview a coach before. I said, listen, like if we had, let's say, Pete Wilk coming in with Georgetown. I said, Pete, what do you want me to say about your team? What's the best things about your team? You tell me. I said, now, what do you don't want me to say about the team? Because, a lot of parents, grandparents, people listen, kids, fans. I don't want to step on anybody's toes, but I'll call the game the way I see it, But I don't want to and it worked out great. And I've been doing it ever since. One year I did the Big East Championships. Actually, I did 2 Big East Championships. And my partner was Spencer Ross. And Spencer was just retired from Wings. He was a former broadcaster for the Yankees for many years with Bill White and Phil Rizzuto. I still speak to Spencer. Wonderful guy. And we did, I think, 8 games in 3 days, nonstop.
And you thought you were retired.
Yeah, and gradually I worked for the Big East. I would do some games in certain locations like Washington or Philadelphia. I'd go down and do those games. And it was great. It's just I was all set to do it this year. I know Blanky left, took the job with the Mets, but Mike is such a great guy. I wanted to stay on with St. John's and really promote the program, continue to promote the program, and be a spokesman. Not only a spokesman for St. John's, but a spokesman for the Big East,
Yeah.
a spokesman for all the schools in the Big East, whether it was Seton Hall, which was, brotherly love against one family against the other family, or Pete down at Georgetown, or, any of the schools that are coming in. And I was really looking forward to this year. And when I'm in Florida, I would go see a lot of the teams in Port Charlotte or played Florida Gulf Coast, and I'd just take a look at them, and I knew some of those coaches that I would see. Dartmouth I saw a couple of times, and down here I saw Georgetown a couple of times. I saw Pepperdine. I know the coaches at Pepperdine. So it's always been a lot of fun.
And you also plan so next year, I mean, obviously we hope you continue to do it. You don't see giving it up anytime soon?
No, because me and JetBlue become best friends. I have nonstop flights. I still have my car at my son's house in Garden City, or it stays in Darien, Connecticut with my daughter, or in Northport with my other daughter. I have one daughter that lives down here in right where we live here. But I mean, I had 6 flights canceled. I had to cancel.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's real simple. It's 2.5 hours. I'm landing, half-hour jockey to the house. Then I got my car, see all my grandkids, all the places. Sometimes Rita would come up with me, and we'd have some fun for a couple of days. And I went away and I would mix up also. I have to say, I started broadcasting at New York Tech too. So that was filling in a gap, because New York Tech, they have a good guy, John Spiros, up-and-coming broadcast. It's going to be outstanding out there. I did the ECCs. Wherever I didn't run into a conflict with St. John's,
You would do that.
I would do those. I did the ECC championships because the Big East was away. I had a wonderful time doing that, so I had the linkage into New York Tech again. And they put me in the Hall of Fame. They
yes, 2016, right? The Hall of Fame.
They put my wife in the Hall of Fame too.
I did not know that. That's awesome.
They put her in the Hall of Fame.
That's that. Well, because she let you for all those years coach them, right?
No, she knew all the parents. She used to work the parents all the time. She knew all the girlfriends. She knew all the kids growing up. Yeah, it's great.
That's awesome. Well, one quick last thing. I appreciate you hopping on here, and anybody listening or watching this, they need to check you out next year on the St. John's broadcast. But
absolutely,
I got to give credit because John Mockin set this up. He's the Rawlins rep. What was the relationship between New York Tech and Rawlins? Were you guys sponsored by Rawlins, or what was that relationship like?
Well, I was with Wilson for many, many years.
Yeah.
And then John hooked up with Rawlins, and he sat down with me, and I had a good contract with Wilson. I mean, and Rawlins just blew that contract right out of the water. and I went to my AD. I said, listen, we got to sign this deal. I said, this is too good to be true. This is going to save a lot of money, institution, a lot of money. Plus, it's a solid product.
Yeah.
It's a solid product. And so that's what I did. And John once in a while worked for us in the summer too, by the way, early in his career when he was helping out at Post. So we had signed on with him, and I was instrumental after I left the school itself, when I think went to Under Armour. No offense to Under Armour. But when Frank came back, we worked at that, and the new AD, Dwayne Bailey at the time, who's now at Southwest Louisiana, or Louisiana Lafayette. Dan Velez took over then. He said, what do you think? I said, go back to Rawlins. I'm telling you, it's much better. I said, it's a better deal for baseball. I don't think any sport should be locked into one deal. And if it benefits the institution, and that was good. That was great, But we used to run a winter program. I want to go back to one other thing. We started a winter program. It's called a pitching workshop many, many years ago. And at that time, the gentleman was pitching in the Yankee organization. He's a former Tech player. He went on all the way through the minor leagues to pitch in the big leagues, and then wound up coaching in the minor leagues all the way back to being a major league pitching coach. And that's Don Cooper of the Chicago White Sox.
Yeah. That's Johnny's
Donnie
boy.
and Donnie, let me say about Donnie and I. Donnie and I started this pitching workshop in the winter for 5 consecutive Sundays in a little boxcar gym at New York Tech. It looked like PS6. Okay, that was the size of the gym. We used to run kids through there. When I say run them through, we had 5 sessions on Sunday. We took anywhere from 30 to 40 players per 2-hour period. We worked for 10 hours. We did Saturday mornings for another 4 hours. And Anybody that was a pitcher during those years went to that pitching workshop. And it was great. We had all minor league coaches come in. I used to fly guys in, minor league pitching coaches. I had a great staff that was local. And so many kids went through that program. We were the first ones that started individual lessons on Long Island. Donnie and myself. We did pitching lessons. This is 1984, somewhere around there. Nobody had done that. And we didn't do half-hour lessons. We did 1-hour lessons. We spent time with kids. And they hired the catchers. People used to bring their own catchers. Then we started a catcher workshop. Tommy Thompson, who was the coordinator for the White Sox at the time. Now he's a minor league evaluator, usually bases himself in Charlotte. He would handle all the catchers. So we'd fly him in from Oklahoma. And he'd come in for 5 Sundays. We used to fly back and forth from Oklahoma. And we had the greatest time, because that added a lot of credibility to what the New York Baseball Academy represented. And then, look, Donnie was just a minor league pitcher, but then he became a big league pitcher.
Yeah, anybody listening to this, Don Cooper, he's I mean, forever he's been the Chicago White Sox pitching coach, right? I mean,
yeah, he survives managers. I mean, he's been blessed. He's been blessed that way. And in fact, I got to give him a call. I usually talk to him every couple of weeks. He just did the reason why is I had to listen to his podcast the other day. So, he's in Nashville now, and he was so instrumental. He would even come in the summertime. Tell you what a dedicated guy he was. They'd have the All-Star game, right? So he was off for 3 days.
Yeah.
He would fly in to New York and make a guest appearance at the camp for 3 hours and fly back on one of his 3 days off in the entire season. That's what he would do. Dedication to the kids in the New York metropolitan area and to Rita and I, fantastic.
I mean, you've known him. Guy. I mean, you've known him you were his pitching coach when he was at Tech, right?
No, I can't really say it had nothing to do with him. Who recruited him he was a pitcher. He was a good basketball player too, by the way, at McClancy High School. Al Goldis, one of the original Tech coaches, recruited him. He played for Richie Tappan. The year he signed, I came in the next year. He signed with the Yankees. But we became friends because he used to work out.
Yeah.
But Al Goldis recruited him. Al Goldis is in the Scouts Hall of Fame. When he left New York Tech, he became a very famous scout with the California Angels. And then to the White Sox, I mean, he was responsible for drafting guys like Robin Ventura. He was the head guy. Frank Thomas. These are some of the key guys that he would draft. Yeah. In the Scouts Hall of Fame. He lives in Sarasota. He's on Facebook. He lives in Sarasota, Florida. I was his pitching coach. The first year I got in the Marine Corps in the summertime, he hired me as a pitching coach. You know what he paid me? He paid me $25 and a Bob Shaw book on pitching. But I had $1 million education working under him. And sometimes you have to learn to earn. And that was critical. And I was his pitching coach for a couple of years with the ACB.
That is awesome. All right, I'll leave you with one question. Unless they made a movie about your life that I don't know about, if there was to play one actor to play you, who would it be in a movie?
Actor to play me? Wow. Jimmy Leland. He doesn't have to act. All he has to do is be himself.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Bob, I thank you for coming on here. I mean, we could talk for another hour, but your resume.
Get me anytime. Remember, I'm not going anywhere. not in this environment.
Absolutely. Yeah. So next year, hopefully when things are back to normal and St. John's is obviously playing and stuff like that, and you're calling a game, I'd love to meet you face to face. I'll have Johnny set it up. So
yeah, come on over anytime. Anytime.
Awesome.
Thank you very much. Right? And good luck with your job too. And thanks for having me on.
All right. Yep. Tell Rita I said hi. All right.
Absolutely. Bye-bye now.